So you might be trying to figure out which specific Apple Watch you want to buy, whether it's the 41mm size or if it's the 45mm size. Now, typically Apple Watches, kind of came in two different sizes for their whole entire life. It wasn't until recently we got a little bit more of a size difference because the Apple Watch Ultra, but also with the newer, 1mm difference from the Series, 6 to the Series 7. Now, as I've always stated, if you have the opportunity to, getting the bigger or more expensive, stuff is definitely the better way to go. Now, that's not always the case, but when it comes down to electronics, if you can go from like the 14 to the 14 Pro or the 13 to the 13 Pro or like an iPad Air to an iPad Pro, things like that typically will give you a longer experience you can have for those devices, but that's not always the best value per dollar. So in this case, the difference between an Apple Watch, Series 8 at 41mm and an Apple Watch Series 8 at 45mm, the only difference for the most part, there's really only two things I can think of. One is the size. The size of these Apple Watches are quite a bit different, but they're not like drastically different, I will be honest. If you're totally okay with a smaller watch, then definitely getting the smaller one, I think, is a better value per dollar in a way because they are getting the same exact features. So from a size perspective, from me owning basically every size of every Apple Watch, the bigger sizes, which are the 44mm and 45mm watches, typically end up giving me a better experience for the most part than the smaller size watches. And the main reason for this is because of the bigger size display. The display is actually quite a bit bigger when you're actually rocking it with that 44 or 45mm option. I've noticed that with the 41 or 40mm option, it's not as, I don't know the best way to describe it, but it is almost like using a mini iPhone. For some people it works out perfectly and it's the only one they want. For some other people, it may be a little bit too small. So in my perspective, having a Apple Watch that is the bigger size at 45mm or even 44mm is actually really nice, and I do prefer that a lot. Now, another thing that kind of cycles down a little bit is the battery life. I haven't really noticed a massive battery size difference, at least for my 41mm and my 45mm Apple Watches. Now, I'm sure there are a lot of tests that many people kind of, associate between both these watches, but from what I've seen and from what I've kind of messed with, I'm actually pretty happy with how my original Apple Watch, even my 38mm and 42mm Apple Watch's battery life, it was kind of giving me throughout the whole entire day. My Series 4 that I'm using on an everyday basis now gets the job done very, very well. And now with the 41 and 45mm sizes, they also do a very, very good job on that specific battery life department as well. So you're not really going to be noticing, at least from what I can tell, a massive difference in battery life. In fact, Apple actually states that both these Apple Watches have the same battery life according to them. So that might be another thing to keep in mind as well. You can get both the GPS and cellular models between them, which is cool, and that pretty much, all the features are the same between these watches. Now, another thing to keep in mind, this is probably one of the last things besides the sizes and the battery life, whatever, is actually with the bands. You have to remember that with an Apple Watch Series 8 that is at 45mm versus the 41mm, the bands are going to be different. So you can use the smaller bands on the smaller Apple Watches on all of them, whether you have a 38mm one or whether you have a 41mm one. But if you're going up to that 45mm one, bands are not interchangeable between them. So you can use the 42 all the way up to the 45mm ones on the same specific Apple Watch, but you cannot go through and use a 41mm Apple Watch band on that 45mm Apple Watch. So definitely keep that in mind. If there's specific bands you have in the back of your head, or if you already have an assortment of different bands that you're going to use, well, maybe more so than the size and the battery life and all that, you may be wanting to make sure that those bands that you're using are actually interchangeable and can actually connect to that Apple Watch that you're wanting to go through. So from my opinion, from using all these Apple Watches, the sizes are definitely the biggest difference. I would probably never have an issue with going from one band to the other. I typically have one band and I keep it forever until I upgrade my Apple Watch. So that's kind of the one thing to keep in mind there. But regardless, I think you can't really go wrong with either one of these. They are tremendous Apple Watches. They have a ton of capability. And honestly, if you're in the market, you can't really go wrong with either one. Personally, I'm going to be using the bigger size watches, but if you're okay with the smaller ones, then I would completely say go for it. So that pretty much covers it up. If you have any other thoughts or questions, let me know in the comment section below. Hit the like button, that would mean so much, but definitely hit that subscribe button. More importantly than everything else, I love every single one of you guys. Hopefully I'll catch you guys in the next video. Peace out till then.